Welcome to the Resilient Butterfly Podcast. My goal is to share inspiring stories of healing and recovery through many diverse approaches and models. Our guests bring incredible lived experiences, insights, and/or professional expertise, each with their own unique path. While we highlight and celebrate these stories, our intention is to inform, inspire, and demonstrate resilience and creativity. This podcast does not endorse any one approach. We believe there is more than one way to heal, and we're here to showcase the resilience and possibilities that exist. Welcome back to Resilient Butterfly. I'm your host, Pam Feinberg-Rivkin. Today's conversation is one I believe every parent, educator, and caregiver needs to hear. When many of us hear the word marijuana, we think about something relatively harmless, something we may have experienced with years ago, but what teens are exposed to today is very different. The marijuana of the past is not the marijuana today our kids are using. The potency is higher, the delivery systems are stronger, and the risks, especially to the developing adolescent brain, are far more serious. Across the country, we're seeing more teens experience anxiety, depression, paranoia, and psychosis, sometimes triggered or unmasked by marijuana use. Parents often feel blindsided, asking, how did this escalate so quickly? At the same time, teens are navigating unprecedented pressures, constant social media exposure, cyberbullying that never turns off, academic stress, and social comparison, all while their brains are still developing. Today, I'm joined by John Lieberman, CEO of Visions Adolescent Treatment in Malibu. John has decades of experience working with adolescents and families, and Visions is known for treating not just the teen, but the entire family system. We're going to talk openly about the risks of marijuana for teens, what psychosis can look like, whether teens can recover and go on to live full lives, what other substances families should be aware of, and why bullying and suicide feels so much more prevalent today. More importantly, we're going to talk about hope, early warning signs, and what parents can do without fear, shame, or blame. This is an important conversation. Let's get into it. John, so from your perspective at Visions and otherwise in your decades of working with teens, how has marijuana changed for the adolescents today versus what it used to be?
Well, probably the number one reason that kids come into treatment today for residential treatment is really THC use, cannabis. That's a surprise. I mean, it used to be that kids would come in because they graduated from THC to something else, like they graduated to using, parents would find out they're using psychedelics, parents would find out that they're using amphetamines, opiates, other pills, the addition of alcohol, and that's why, parents would see that, and they'd see behaviors that coincided with that behaviors. So, but today we see most of our kids, I get calls from parents and they're saying, but it's just marijuana, it's just THC. Mm-hmm. And my response is, cannabis is enough. It is. And there were kids that we got before who were addicted to it. It took more effort before because THC is in so many different forms today, right? Mm-hmm. You can get it, you can have it in a vape pen, a dab pen, you can have it in liquid form. There's also flower available, but it's interesting, 4 years into Colorado's, when they first legalized marijuana, after 4 years, they said they were selling more extract than they were flower.
Wow.
That was the whole plan. Nobody read the legislation. The legislation literally said that the government could have no say and no input on how it was grown, how it was produced, any extracts, any hybrid, any alteration, like nothing. We don't allow that with anything else. Everything else, if a tomato is going to be grown, we want to know, okay, Is it heirloom? Where was it grown? What was the name of the cow that the manure came from to fertilize it, right? We go through all of these machinations.
Right.
Some of them are really important. And then for THC, they're hydroponically grown using an immense amount of power to do it, not to mention the chemicals. And then they're extracted using things like propane to do it, and everybody's fine with it. It's really sad.
It is very sad.
It's very sad.
And what are the behavioral changes that you're seeing the parents are calling you or interventionists are working with families, educational consultants, us, Feinberg Consulting, are working with families to, what are some of the behavioral changes that are coming?
Well, in the past, and you'd recognize, Pam, we would say, well, we would listen to parents and you'd find out, they're sneaking out at night, right? They're hanging out with new friends that are different. The parents are uncomfortable, haven't met these friends before. There's maybe won't wake up in the morning. It's harder to get them up for school. They took the family car. Mom noticed some money missing. These, truancies at school, things like that, right? Those would be the big markers. And you would say, oh, we need to look into substance use at this point and a program that can actually address this. And parents would say, I think it's just it's emotional or something. And you try to, if we just treat that, you're going to end up with the same issues coming home. We gotta address this, right? It's gotta be addressed. So, but what we see today, and I think there's two significant factors that are really crucial. The first factor is that the warning signs have changed. The warning signs have changed, but nobody has rewritten the book. The warning signs, because kids don't have to go find another friend and make these odd social connections, which social connections have pluses and minuses. They just go to one of these, right?
Yeah.
They go to Snapchat, they go to Discord, they go to Insta, and they can get basically whatever they want very quickly. They don't even have to leave their house. And THC by itself does not usually get somebody to do a lot of, they're not taking their parents' car to drive across town to go to that party. They're fine at home alone. And if we take a look at that, our kids, the suicide rate is up, anxiety is up, depression is up. Well, those are the things you do not want to layer on THC. I was literally last night, I was with Dr. Fong from UCLA.
Yeah.
He studies THC, cannabis. That's what he does.
Right.
He said 3 times to this group of parents, there is no mental health application for THC or cannabis at this time. None. And people are like, it helps with my anxiety. It doesn't. It actually exacerbates it.
Yeah. And it exacerbates depression too, all of it.
Exacerbates depression. And I remember, I used to run a lot of school groups. There was a period of time when I ran 25 school groups a week. And throughout Ventura County, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Santa Monica. I would go right onto the campus. And then we had special groups we'd run at night for kids. So if somebody got in trouble at school, there was an alternative to suspension program. So those kids could come to our group on campus once a week. Then for 10 weeks, they had to come with their parents during the evening, and then they would get the suspension would be written off if their parents came 10 times.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, the idea was, let's not be punitive,
right,
and let's do some intervention work here, because sending kids to another school is just moving the problem from one place to another.
Sure.
So, one of these, when I was in group one day, and I said to this group, I said, guys, listen, if something doesn't change, I'm really worried about something happening to one of you. And Ryan didn't come back the next week because he killed himself. And one of the kids said, "You said, John." But what the thing was is I talked to the police that were there, and we were dealing with the grief and loss in the moment, right? Kids walking back into the room, finding out that Ryan had killed himself. And the police officer said, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, because when we find these kids, every time there's a drug on board when they kill themselves. He said, from his point of view, this was a long time ago, is that there was like the THC or alcohol, that was the major ones. They took away that trigger, that couple of seconds to think about it. Think about what you're doing. Think about it before you leap, before you cut yourself, before. So that's where somebody says substance abuse is not necessarily related to suicide. It would be more related to somebody's how impulsive they are in the moment. Because we know when somebody's under the influence, their regulation system, especially with THC, and people don't understand this, THC affects every regulation system in your body. A lot, like alcohol does some things with memory, does some things with how you're coordinated and perception. Literally, THC affects your digestion, your feelings, your perception of time. That's what people think. They drive slower. How you're able to your dexterity, your thinking process. It literally, if you look at it, it like swarms the whole brain and other areas of your body. The vagal nerve, it does a lot of things, and people say, no, it's safe. It's not safe.
So when you say digestive system, what came to mind is the hyperemesis, that people end up in the emergency room, young adults, adolescents, in the emergency room with some really bad, and then they get worked up, and unless somebody's really asking them the right questions, it kind of doesn't necessarily land how much marijuana they're actually using, or THC.
So there's two sides. So hyperemesis, when they start involuntarily vomiting and can't stop, right? And the first time we heard about this, I think it was about 10 years ago. I had already heard about it from families that they didn't know what was happening to their child. But just 4 years ago in Los Angeles, one of the parents who was in the group last night said that he was literally signing the paperwork for his daughter to have an emergency appendectomy when somebody else walked in and said, it might be this other thing. And it was hyperemesis. And that takes a great deal of using, and some people are more sensitive to others. But the other side of that, from the digestive part, is actually one of the reasons we look at THC as maybe helpful, because marinol, one of the active ingredients in cannabis, it helps cancer patients because it increases their appetite so they can eat without feeling nausea. So, but that doesn't justify what's happening any more than saying we have to have more. Everybody should have more OxyContin and fentanyl because it helps some people.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we're having that. That's the argument.
I'm sorry for laughing, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a bad argument for sure. How often are you said most teens that come into Visions now, it's THC use. At what point did you see this starting to rise in numbers?
It was 2016, the legalization.
Oh, okay.
As the legalization started ramping up, the same time that was happening, about that time, the vaporizing, of THC and liquefaction of, was starting to happen. So all these things kind of happen at a similar time. Also, when you think about cannabis, if you walk out your door in any city at this point, you usually smell it. But when we're talking about the liquid forms that can look like, a USB drive, there's no smell.
Right.
So this is really important in the whole, when people say, when people talk about THC and, whether it's dangerous or not, we hadn't seen very many people use cannabis as frequently as what we see now. Because kids are now, this isn't a one-off, the kids they can take a few puffs before they go to school and nobody smells it. They can eat a gummy at school and nobody smells it. Then if they want to smoke a joint that is flower at home, nobody smells it. Or they'll just use this very high concentrate that they hit throughout the day. Mm-hmm. We absolutely see addiction. We see long-term detox from kids, with kids, on adults. I mean, I don't treat adults, but we see that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is added to this is there used to be this ad. It probably still is out there somewhere, like on cannabis sites. It would say, alcohol deaths per year, 140,000 or whatever the number was. Mm-hmm. Then it would say cocaine overdose deaths, then, heroin, opiate overdose deaths. And then it would say THC overdose deaths, 0.
Yeah.
That's just not true.
Yeah.
It's not a fact. When we talk about suicide and car accidents and the psychosis that happens, there are deaths happen in many different ways, right? Mm-hmm.
It may not be directly because of the drug that is ingested at the time, but it's the effects of the drug that other behaviors, as you say, suicide occurs, which causes death. So when you say detox is longer, what does a detox look like for cannabis?
Well, the biggest part is that they feel when they're first coming off, depending on how much somebody's been using, and if they're in, THC-induced psychosis. For that kind of a situation, mm-hmm. It looks like somebody being very miserable, agitated, very fast speech. Somebody might even think the person's bipolar, confusion, and a lot of ramping up and down, to the point where, in hospitals, young people and adults are having to be restrained in the emergency rooms over, THC-induced psychosis. And that detox, that change, that damage that's happened to the brain, you can take even to where somebody is essentially having a normal conversation, can take 30 to 60 days. Mm-hmm. Generally, what we see, though, with kids, we do see THC-induced psychosis, but predominantly what we see is the aggravation, anxiety, paranoia that happens initially, and that's when we usually get kids. And that really is about a 6-week process that it just takes some time. There's not really a medication for that either. Sure. There's not, you can't find what's the protocol for THC with, withdrawal, and there isn't a good protocol.
It's just time.
It's time.
And I know that you and we've worked with some of the adolescents that have come from hospitalization due to mm-hmm. psychosis. And initially they go into a psychiatric admission, an acute psychiatric stay, until they're somewhat stabilized, at least stabilized enough to go to a residential program. When they're at that point, that's where you see much more like hallucinations and paranoia, like really acute situations where kids may be running through the streets even.
Yes, and in fact, one of the things that parents will say, it has to be something else. Mm. It has to be something else. It can't just be pot. And parents don't understand. It wasn't just pot. So it's a similar thing. If you drank a beer, but that beer was actually Everclear or Bacardi 151, you would have a different reaction than if you just drank a beer, or even if you drank 6 beers. Because really what you did is you drank 9 beers or 12, right? All at once. It's not the same animal at all. It's a completely different thing.
So,
and since the 90s, this has all changed, but we haven't.
our bodies haven't. No.
No,
Right.
our brains haven't changed. So, but we've added all this on.
And the developing brain of the adolescent is even greater chance of really being fracturing, as I want to say. It's really them having a break in their psychiatric.
Yes. So so the chances of having a break are greater. We see this more and more, even when somebody's been using for as little as 3 or 4 months with consistent use. And the nice part, so on the other side, helping an adolescent, their brain is more malleable for better or for worse. And for better means when we help them, those kids, are not using and they're sober and they're working on things like, with their families, they're going to counseling, they're back, working on their education, and you're trying to help their brain kind of do the things it takes to manage, right? In a sense, I mean, a little bit of this is, I'm assuming, but the synapses and the things in their brain, you're getting them all to work in a way that they're in a helpful way. And that includes emotional, so to speak, spiritual connections too.
Sure.
In fact, that may be the most important. In fact, the best from psychiatric care today, we talk more about, whole health is as important prescription as anything else, which includes, the food that we eat, the sleep that we get, the exercise that we get, but also the company that we keep. And because we know that isolation if you don't feel connected, it's also very difficult.
How much do you see the adolescents coming into Visions that are affected by the pressures of society and the cyberbullying, the bullying in the schools, and all of those that I think have been going on for years, but they're obviously much more heightened because of social media. Do you see a lot of that?
We see a lot of that. Well, we have primary mental health programming too. So we see what we see with kids who are dealing with bullying. And how about just before, because some things feel like bullying that are just part of the social framework. Like anybody puts a picture up, it's going to get hearts and not hearts, or thumbs up, thumbs down, right? So is that bullying? I mean, if everybody does it, yes. But it depends on who does it. Who does thumb downs? How many likes am I going to get? How many dislikes am I going to get? And the only thing I'm going to focus is the dislikes, right? Anybody who's ever done and you and I may have done a few newspaper articles in the past, and all we want to know is, did somebody like it, right? I mean, we want to know not if somebody liked it, who didn't like it, right?
Right.
And that can send us down a rabbit hole. So how much more for the kids where these rabbit holes are just coming at them, bang, 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 as they're trying to manage the effect is profound for kids.
How do you work through that during the residential stay?
Well, first, no screens, no laptops, no iPads, iPods. There has to be, kids have to be separated from. And the interesting thing, and studies have been done, and if you look at, the easiest book to refer to is, Anxious Generation. When the kids don't have that, connection's important to them. This is what the companies are pretending like they don't capitalize on. Connection's important, but it takes effort to have connection with another person, right? There's relationship, there's push and pull, there's repair, there's all those things that go on. You get no repair with this, and all you're looking for is the pull, right? So that's how they've designed this for the pull, to pull you back in. Because it would make sense after a couple of times not repairing. If you don't repair with a friend a few times, they're not your friend anymore. Well, we don't treat social media like that. In fact, the more things aren't repaired, the more people go back to it.
Sure.
They go back to the trough. And all this is, everybody talks about social media and the process and what it's good for. Let's be very, very clear. This is a product, and people are making money off that, what you're talking about right now. When somebody says, well, there's a good side for this, a certain social, I went and visited a therapist in a big city. I won't go into it because somebody might figure it out. But this person, we walked in, me and one of my colleagues, because we knew that this individual treated kids with ASD and had gotten into drugs and things like that. And this therapist said, well, these kids really use Discord, which is it's a social media platform that has no holds barred. Like, you could find people who talk and support any horrible thing in the world. And this therapist is trying to tell me why it's so helpful for those kids, because they find connection with other people who believe what they believe. Like, that's not safe and that's not good.
Well, it's a little bit on the crazy side, I would say.
Yeah, I would say, if I wanted to use the word naive, which yes, but also we recognize, if you're in the, working with kids like we do, we recognize the risk factors and how kids get taken advantage of, right? Led astray, because kids are vulnerable, right?
Sure. So since the marijuana use, the cannabis use now, it can go undetected. Parents can't smell it. What are some of the first warning signs before they unfortunately get into more paranoia and psychosis? What are some of the things that they can look for?
Well, they're a teenager. That's the first thing you look for.
Yeah.
If we're looking at 62%, I think I think I looked it up here just recently. I think it depends. 40% of high school seniors have used cannabis in their lifetime. So almost half. So we should be considering that if I have two children, one of them has, right? Now, what's the risk factor? The risk factor is 9% of those who try at a young age will have a problem. Well,
Say
that's
that
bad.
again. What is the percentage again? Say that again.
9%.
9%.
That's bad. And that was taken, those results were taken like in 2019. I don't know if they've changed much, but 9%. So you go, well, that's kind of low. Okay. Let's just try this. If 9% of people who ate an ice cream would have life-altering events, including things like STDs, unwanted pregnancies, failing out of schools, having to go to treatment centers, relationships that are fractured, how many people would go, I like ice cream, but I'm not doing that anymore? But with THC, we make excuses for it, like because I did it, or it's natural, it's okay. Let's be really clear.
There's nothing,
opium is natural.
Yeah, there's nothing natural that is healthy.
No, there's not. So 9% of 15%, so of whatever, 9% of those still very high. Yeah. And what we know from the original CASA studies is that 25% of individuals who use some mood-altering chemical around puberty, 25% will have addiction-related problems, consequences. Doesn't mean they're going to be addicts, but addiction-related consequences.
That's a
really
high.
Bad. That's 25%.
That's a high percentage.
So really high percentage. and that's partially because for kids who try alcohol, that 23% of them who try even just drink it the first time, as you know, before puberty, 23% of them will have consequences, and then other drugs are higher. So when you combine them all together, it comes to about 25%. This is the best part of the story. This is the part of the story I love. We can change that to 1 in 25 or less that will have a problem if they waited till after they were 21 years old.
That's what I was going to ask you to address. If they can only wait until 21 years old, they have the likelihood of being able to have a drink of wine or beer and not have the problem that they have when they're starting in adolescent.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We know exactly what to do. And instead what we've done is, I'm going to be a little bit upsetting now. I think we walk over the graves of our children to justify cannabis and people thinking that it's okay to use. We walk over the graves of our children. The reason I say that is you have all these people who talk about things. They're using words to describe different vehicles to get THC in your system, things like gummies and drinks, and these really cool names and these fun things. We decided that wasn't okay with nicotine. Joe Camel's not allowed to be out there anymore. Alcohol can't have any kind of cool stuff around it because we know that we don't want children to start engaging with that stuff early. And instead, we're out here on the streets. I would use a lot of foul words right now that you see the pretty bongs in the windows and all this stuff and the pretty packaging and calling things gummies. It's not gummies. It could really hurt you.
Yeah.
And it has. Kids have been hurt from getting a hold of quote unquote something that looks like a candy to them. You can get THC lollipops, suckers, all these things. It's really serious.
Yeah. What are in talking to the parents, if there is a assessment done, what is the reason to have an assessment for residential treatment versus outpatient care?
Well, it depends a little bit when we talk about the different levels of care, I won't go on the soapbox, but most of the names of them are names that insurance companies give.
Sure.
So I think when it comes to something like residential treatment, as you know, the criteria for admission is not what I'm looking for. I'm more looking for how is the family doing with what's going on in their home? Are they concerned about what's going on with their child? Is their child, because that's where being able to do really good, quote unquote, dual diagnosis, again, insurance name or a diagnostic DSM-5 name, when really what there is a combination of issues going on. A lot of times there's trauma that's happened. Maybe there's adoption. We have kids who are neurodivergent, kids with just complicated issues that happen in their lives, right? And a lot of times what somebody's thinking about is, what are the symptoms? When I'm thinking about how is your son or daughter, how are they managing? So these are the questions, the most important things I think we look at. We look at first family. How are things going at home? Then the next place they spend their time, how are things going at school? How are things going with their friends? How are things going in with extracurricular activities or a special someone for adolescents, boyfriend or girlfriend, or both, or whatever their child is? How are things, is there a spiritual connection for that child? How are things going? If there is, how are things going there? Are there any medical issues that should be addressed? Because you'll find kids that have things like diabetes or Crohn's disease or something like that. These are all, so you look at health. Many times what we're looking at when we do an assessment, and probably the same for you, is you find out they're struggling in almost every area, or they're struggling in every area but one. And I ask, well, what happens if there's a little bit, if that doesn't go well? And parents very quickly, when I'm just asking those questions in my assessment process, I'm just writing these things down. And then I can go back and say, you mentioned at home, this is how things are going. He's fighting, say, with his brother or his sister. You found out that, he's not, doesn't want to go to school anymore, school refusal. We kind of go through these things. And I say, so what's going well for Johnny right now? Or what's the risk if all of a sudden he doesn't do, he can't go out for football or something like that. And a lot of times the parents are like, yeah, the coach called me. He might not be able to go out for football. What happens? Then there's not one thing, because that's what parents will do. They'll hold on to one thing. Well, they're still doing good in sports. They're still getting straight A's. Like the one thing, they're still getting straight A's, but at home they're using, they can't manage. They're having a hard time. So what if that slips? We have a lot of kids who come into treatment that are still getting straight A's because their parents realize, like they find out that underneath that, their child's having, say, suicidal feelings, thoughts, or cutting or something like that along with the substance use.
I want to talk about other drugs that may be seen as adolescents are coming into your program that that there is a concern with. You mentioned that at some point there were opiates and amphetamines and hallucinogens. Are any of those still being used, or are there other new drugs as well that?
Yeah, there's new drugs, and absolutely, we're in a world now that has decided that hallucinogens and psilocybin are going to be the new drug. There might be some efficacy, but that doesn't mean kids should get a hold of them. Again, we have the developing brain. Obviously, we see what's happened with ketamine, and there's physicians who, and even companies that will send it through the mail to people. It's completely irresponsible. Even where you take something that might have some efficacy, especially for someone who's been dealing with persistent depression, suicidal ideation. These are people who need this. And then you have these companies that are just bastardizing that, saying that these people can just, take nasal sprays at home of ketamine. Ketamine is a very powerful drug.
Sure.
And like it or not, it acts like an opiate, in the way it deals with some of the.
And we've had young adults who are addicted to the ketamine coming into needing treatment. So it's a really, really hard drug for them to get off from. As far as I want to talk about grief and the grief that parents go through and the loss of who they thought their child was going to be or was and then became, and the shame that they are feeling, and how can they work through this? Well,
so I walked into a group one day and that I was doing, and I said, this is where you just brace yourself. If you don't like foul language, you're just going to have to deal with it. I went to a group there were about nine to maybe 18 parents in the room for 9 kids. So almost all their parents were there. And I said, so who's lied about your kid this week? And people raised their hand and asked this guy, I said, who'd you lie to? He said, I lied to fucking everybody. I lied to grandma. I lied to my friend. I lied to my boss. I lied to, I told one person they were at camp. I told somebody else this. I told somebody else that. He said, I don't even know how to talk about this. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I feel ashamed about this. I feel like if my mom knew what happened, she would accuse me of airing our dirty laundry just by bringing our child to treatment. This part between the shame and the alienation, and then you take these families, that what's happening to them is, when we talk back about loneliness, for a community, it's so important that we have alumni support groups and ways to support these parents until they can figure out how to share their story and stay connected, because they will literally pull back from a lot of their relationships. And then what good are they when we're trying to prepare for Johnny to go home?
Sure.
And what are they going to say when Johnny comes home? And Johnny's wondering too. It's interesting, when kids start doing better, they want to tell everybody. Parents are like, wait, you can't tell. And kids are like, it's my story. So you try to figure out what the balance is there, right?
And we're talking about preparing the family, the adolescent and the parents and the siblings. And we at Feinberg Consulting can help and have been, obviously, we've continued that in support of the parents, the family, the child, adolescent. And you guys obviously have a lot of preparation for them as well. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So there's a few things that we do to help. I probably should say this too. So a friend of mine whose son went through treatment, he talks about it honestly. He actually runs our family program now. Keith Fearman, you know Keith probably.
Yeah.
What he talked about when his son went through treatment is the grief of realizing that his son wasn't going to be able to participate in college the way that he did. He wasn't going to be in a fraternity. Which probably wasn't good for him anyway, but there were these things that just, he knew very quickly that would not be a safe place for him. And there was a culture in his family that this is kind of how you was almost like, this is how you became an adult. This is how you really became part of the family, was going to college, getting a degree. Even if you struggled there, it didn't matter, though, that it was just part of the culture. And he was really sad. He was really had, like he talked about, he recognized still that it wasn't going to be a good idea. So then, and back then there were not a lot of collegiate, college programs out there. So I think that's important. And you talked about, how do we prepare? Well, having good support groups, like educating parents on what codependency looks like. We don't talk much about codependency these days. What does that look like? How parents, so we do a 3-day, parent intensive program where parents look at themselves and their own process in this. And then also connecting those families, making sure where we can, to work with what you do, right? As it comes for that next step. And because we're trying to get them to have connections and support. And this is one of the examples I use with families when they say, well, we're going to bring Johnny home. And I asked them, so the last time you were in your front door, what was happening?
That's a good question to ask.
With your child, what was happening? Sometimes they were getting arrested. Sometimes they were screaming at him. Sometimes they're going out in a gurney. Sometimes mom went out. What do you mean last time? I didn't know where he was. There was an emergency. They were transported to treatment. Whatever happened with adolescents. I said, so when you walk back through that door with Johnny, I can guarantee you those feelings will come flooding back in one way or another. And when Johnny says something that seems like it might be similar to what happened then, the tendency is to react. And having an understanding of how you're going to deal with, especially those first few weeks, with a plan, and then the next, like with, counseling, support, coaching, all of those things, it's almost like, you go to a treatment center and you get your hip transplant. Well, the next part is the physical therapy. And if you don't do the physical therapy, you tend to limp for a very long time. Sure. And maybe it won't ever get right. So that's what I think
the planning for going home is a continuation of whatever has been started at residential treatment. But actually the beginning is determining where they go and where they need to be, and then going through that and preparing the families, but they can't be prepared enough to when they go home, that those triggers just keep coming back no matter what. So having that support locally for them is so important, or for somebody to coach them. Parents continue on that.
They need giving them that just gives them an ability to successfully manage. I tell people, if I was going to write a book about residential treatment, the title would be "It's Aftercare, Damn It." you know, because we can get most of our kids leave here. What I tell parents is we want to have them with a gleam in their eye toward their future, right? They want to be like a gleam, like I want to do some things, right?
Sure.
Whatever, whatever that is, maybe get back into their art, their music, their stuff. And the parents are like, wow, that's great. We want that. And then how do we support that, right? Successfully.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else in regard to families, parents finding any type of advice for or something for them, a takeaway for parents? This is really hard stuff for them.
It is. It's hard stuff. And so I've only been doing this for 41 years. So direct services.
How could you beat that? 41 years.
Yeah, working with kids. And I think I have one of the best jobs in the world, really, because I get to see the changes that happen with adolescents in treatment. Treatment, everybody thinks that it's a consequence or it's negative. It isn't. It's an opportunity.
Sure.
It's a gift. It is a really special event. I understand the difficulty behind it. A mom told me one time when I was talking to her about, I could tell it was difficult for her. And she said, John, I figured this out. She said, this is like going through labor again. But I can tell you, there is nothing like the joy at the end of labor and I expect, I didn't know how labor was going to go the first time, and I don't know exactly how this is going to go. But I absolutely know the reason why I'm doing it.
Sure.
And I knew the reason why I was going through labor was because for the joy, right? And the joy and the connection and the happiness. And yeah, I talked about a lot of negative things because I feel passionate about protecting these kids. I mean, literally, I got a text today from someone who texted my daughter. My daughter is 37 years old. She's 8 years sober. I've been through a lot of these things. She texted my daughter because she said, is your dad still doing the same thing? Because my daughter needs some help. And this is a kid who, so now it's
another generation. Wow.
It's another generation. And being able to see that is just amazing. A lot of people would talk about like, building an industry, whatever it is, building their business, which all of that's great. What's great for me is ultimately my kids didn't experience the same thing that I did with my parents, the hurts from, addiction that were with my dad and just the way that my mom just trying to survive. I got to do some things differently. And I think that impacts the world. That's like, it's the ripples in the pond from just dropping a stone, right?
Sure. The generational addiction, trauma that has been going on for, could be decades, can be changed in a family and a family
Absolutely,
system.
It can be changed.
And there's so many times I have to comment on the fact that so many times parents don't recognize the trauma that they've had and the way that they parent. I'm speaking from personal experience.
Sure.
That really affects the way you parent. And it goes on for decades unless there's an abruption in that. And what I want to show or really leave for parents is that it can change. And you're saying the same thing.
It adds not just can. Here's the thing about
does.
therapy. Here's the thing about therapy for the family system thrives on homeostasis. One, it keeps everything the same. This is, I won't go too far into the weeds. That's what the family wants to do. It wants to stay like this and it'll try to stay like this. But when you just make a little bit of a shift, the whole family makes a shift. And if one person will stick to it, and a lot of times, I got to tell you, the person who's going to treatment, the kid with a substance abuse problem, they're actually the leak. Sure. They're sometimes the one that's saying, hey, we all need help.
Yeah, they're the catalyst to change things.
And I can't tell you how the relief and the joy on some moms and dads' faces when they realize that they can participate, in really the same process that their kid is.
Sure, it is a family system. Well, thank you, John. Thank you for joining the conversation today. If you are seeking help for yourself or a loved one, please reach out to our Feinberg Consulting team at 248-538-5425. That's 248-538-5425, and check out our website at feinbergcare.com. I'm grateful for our guests and all who have joined us today. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts.